discussed here. It's something we all want. It's something that's close to everyone's heart. Literally. I mean, like the stomach, it's right there, right next to your heart. So, how are we going to have a well-fed world? Food is also a human right. Again, I mentioned this before, at least according to Article 25 of the United Nations 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Section 1 of which reads, everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family. It says his. It was written in 1948. Including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. You could also argue that a right to food is enshrined in the U.S. Declaration of Independence. Right there in the second sentence, that famous sentence that goes like this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, again, it was written a long time ago, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Food is surely part of life. It's a central source of our happiness. And we need the liberty to be able to control the means of attaining it. Food is not something you want to be dependent on others for, if you can avoid such a circumstance. This latter point, the question of food dependence versus food independence, is central to contemporary debates about food and the distinction between food security and food sovereignty. Is the best way to have a well-fed world to focus on food security or on food sovereignty? First, let's talk about how these terms are defined. Food security first received a widely recognized definition at the 1996 World Food Summit, which stated that food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Whereas the 2007 Declaration of Nyaleni, where there was another very important gathering of world leaders, states that food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. The essential difference is that food security emphasizes access to food, and food sovereignty emphasizes control over food. Think of the difference this way. Imagine that every day you receive your nourishment on your way to work, stopping by a place called Source of Health Natural Medical Center. That's what it says on the sign there if you squint your eyes and read the backwards letters. While you sit in the lounge with a friend, a technician plugs in an IV drip for a couple of minutes. Well, maybe a drip that you choose. How about the red drip today? How about the yellow one? You and your friend decide to compare them, and 10 minutes later, you're back on your way to work. No cooking to do, no dishes to do, no shopping to do. That gives you food access. But does it give you food control? The Source of Health Natural Medical Center is happy to give you a drip, but only as long as you pay for it. What happens if you can't? The point is that you can't have reliable food access without food control. Yes, we are dependent on food, but we need food independence to guarantee that we can get it. This is the essential problem with the common contention that, U.S. farms feed the world. One U.S. farm feeds 165 people, 59 of whom are outside the United States, says the U.S. Farm Bureau. But almost all our food exports go to rich and medium-income countries, not the poor countries where most of the world's 820 million hungry people live. The Environmental Working Group traced our exports in a 2015 study and found that only 0.5%, 1/200th of our food exports went to the 19 hungriest countries in that year. Here are the lines of our exports. And here are where the hungriest countries are. Those lines don't go to those countries. And why? Because we give away very little of our food exports. We sell almost all of it. And the hungry don't have the money to buy it. Because in an increasingly monetary world, that's precisely why they are hungry. They don't have much money. How did that monetized world come about? Well, one of the main ways was through a 75-year-long global project known as development, led by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These two agencies are often called the Bretton Woods institutions because they were founded in 1944 at a meeting of world leaders in a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, just as World War II was coming to a close. They set up these two institutions with the idea that most fundamentally, the fight was over money and colonialization. The idea was that a richer world would be a more peaceful one. And development, that was the way to get there. So they set up the World Bank to give countries loans for long-term development projects like dams, roads, irrigation, and schools. And they set up the International Monetary Fund to give loans for short-term, balance of trade and debt issues. But the trouble is, they don't give the money away. They loan it. And they use it to attract other financial investors who are confident that their loans will get paid back too, because the projects have been vetted by the Bretton Woods institutions. The result is that actually the net flow of money is out of the poor countries into the wealthier ones. The total negative capital flow, according to one study, was $16 trillion just between 1980 and 2012. But it sure got the roads built. So now, even if you live in Manzimdaka, little Manzimdaka, if you take a half day's walk, you can get to Enlobo, the shopping town in the area, where there are several supermarkets. My friend Mpumi and I went around the back of the Spar supermarket there one day, and we watched as a forklift unloaded beef from Brazil, lamb from New Zealand, and chicken from Argentina, all frozen. Meanwhile, if you turn the camera just a little bit from where I took those images, you can see hillsides where people are raising all of these, local people. But they can't get them into the Spar supermarket. The supply chain chains them out of it. And because of lack of investment in other aspects of rural marginalization, they find themselves migrating to the cities for work, sending the money back home so people increasingly can buy their food at the Spar. And why? Because so many people have migrated for work, particularly the men, The farmland in places like Manzimdaka gets neglected. So people find little choice but to get their food at the spar, even though it's a half day's walk to get there. In a country with a 25 to 30% unemployment rate, that is not a secure way to get food. The result is that people have little sovereignty over their food. And when they lose a job, little access either. Stories like this play out all across the global south, as well as in the most disenfranchised sections of the global north. Consequently, there is now a major worldwide social movement to regain sovereignty over food, to regain control over it through bolstering people's local capacities to produce food for themselves and their communities. Because we don't want to feed the world. We want a world that feeds itself. That's the only secure way to have a world which is well fed.